Some say he's a technical whiz. Some say he was born in Cornwall. While some say he's on a journey. It's The Journey, and here's your host, David Hackett.
Another journey, and today's journey, this person helps people recognize the power of communication. It is one of our most important skills that we have, and yet we don't consider our understanding, approach, belief, and therefore miss our possibilities. Living with a paranoid schizophrenic mother gave our guest today a unique and powerful awareness that no one has the same reality that we believe we do. Utilizing this revolutionary awareness has allowed her to transform communication within self and within all types of relationships. This is the hidden key to acceptance. And this is her mission to share, which she is today, and we will welcome. And I'm going to be formal because it is formal on her email she sent me. Dr. Eva Browne, psychology, I believe that is, in diploma LMFT. Welcome.
Thank you very much. It's an honor to be here.
No worries. And my joke, and I always say this when I say this joke, what's your earliest memory that started your journey? And the joke is, yes, we are born, but what was the moment that started your journey?
Well, the one that stands out the strongest from childhood, and I think for a lot of us, it's a painful one. Mine is too. I remember being 3, and my mom and dad were having a very loud fight, and my sister and I wanted to get out of the wrath of that. My sister was older, and so we ran down the hallway. We had adjoining bedrooms with a Mary Jane bathroom in between. We ran down the hallway and ran into my bedroom, and there'd been physical violence just prior. And so we barricaded everything that we could in front of my door. I was putting stuffed animals. Christy was putting chairs because she was bigger, and tried to keep mom and dad out. And then I remember throwing myself on my bed and sobbing. And I remember looking at my sister in the bathroom, and she said, "No one's coming for you." And it wasn't said with malice. It wasn't said with hatred. It wasn't necessarily said with love. It was just our truth. And I remember being 3, sobbing into my little pillow until I fell asleep. And as I look back as an adult and having raised children myself, I know how profound that moment was, and it's such a core piece of who I am, because so much of my life journey has been about wanting to be accepted, working on accepting myself, and then also walking that tightrope of what does it feel like when you may or may not be accepted by others, but certainly always wanting a hug. And so that is a through line in my life's journey. And so I think that's what I have really tried to be for others, that person who would stand in the bathroom hallway and say, "You're not alone. You're not alone. And I'm going to help you come through for yourself. And I'll be here as you help yourself come through for yourself if you desire." And so that's pretty much who I have been in my life's journey so far.
Yeah. And you talk about witness to abuse and physical arguments, as well as having mental arguments probably in your mindset over the time. But people misconceive it sometimes, I believe. And, they always say when you tell someone and they don't know it, it's like, "No, you're making it up. They fine, they fine. And you're like, no, there is something seriously wrong.
Yeah.
Now, for younger children, it's more difficult thing because yes, when you do say mommy had an argument, but daddy is like laugh it off, the older generation, and they will say, no, we're fine. They just imagining it. They believe it's imagination more than actually them communicating, talking the truth.
Well, and there's also the other side that the child only knows their experience. So I didn't, though my mom was, insane my whole life, I didn't know that's what it was until I was 8. So I lived that, but that's all I knew. And so for me, that would be normal because it was. I have a client who passed at 36 and she had a 4-year-old child and twin 2-year-old girls. And as I was walking her through the process of moving toward leaving this world and trying to find how to protect her children and leave legacy of her throughout their lives through letters and videos and presents, and we pulled together so many things to try to bless them as they walk the path. So many messages in my head were these poor children, these poor children, these poor children. They don't have a mom. They don't have a dad. Now they're not going to have a mom, and how horrible. And then fortunately, before she passed, I had the awareness, well, they won't know anything but that. So to them, mommy dying is what happens, and not having a daddy is their existence. Now, they're going to find out very shortly that other people don't have that experience. But there's an interesting place in that realization. What I have had is not what others have. And just because it's what I've known, it doesn't mean it's not. It's part of the reason why child abuse, especially sexual child abuse, is something that is oftentimes not believed, but also oftentimes also not revealed, because though it doesn't feel right to the child, it might not be done in such a way that's violent or even horrific. And so they don't really know what to do with those feelings. And because they have a disease, when they present it, there's a disease. And I think part of that is people don't want to have that conversation. But I think part of that is that the child might not be saying, grandpa molested me. They might be saying things like, it felt weird with grandpa. And they're not going to specify, possibly, he touched me here, because there might be a lot of things other than that. And so I think it's important as a human to realize we know what we know. And for us, that is what it is, until we realize there's other than what we've known. And our walk is our walk, but it might not be anybody else's. And it, in some ways, is probably not the healthiest, too. And I think that's kind of all of our incorporation that we do, looking at our ancestors, looking at our family of origin, looking at what we cultivate for ourselves, and these paths that we keep walking down repeatedly until we gather that information that we are to have. I had an interesting insight on a call with someone who was saying that they relapsed into a pattern of behavior that they had, and they were so angry with themselves because they'd done really well for a while, and then they relapsed, and they went right back to the beginning. And I said, oh no, you haven't. You've retrieved. You didn't relapse. You're not that person you were, but you retrieved something that you had not found or known that you needed to of a prior time to move you completely out. And I certainly hope they had retrieved all that they needed to have. But I think when we look at our lives more so in that way, it's not this linear, but it kind of gets jumbled in places and crosses over and weaves and ebbs and flows. I think that's how reality is a lot of times too. We know what we know until we realize that we don't know as much as we thought we knew. And then that just keeps opening it up more and more and more.
Yeah, and I do understand that totally, because talking from past experience, there's certain things that happened to me, but everyone laughed it off. Now, there was people who were concerned, but they couldn't address it because it had to come from me naturally to make it a more plausible thing. So even though they knew what was happening, and I was like, the child that was laughing always had bruises, They just had to wait for me to say something, and I'm not condoning what happened to me when I was younger was intentional, but it took me till I was 15 to actually go to school and say, this is happening to me. And then something was done, but it was only a temporary thing. Now things happened as I got older, and it got more difficult for me over time with certain things that happened in my life. And, young adults who left home, who go through abuse in care homes, and, I don't know what they call them in America. I think they call them I forgot what they call them. But anyway, it's like supported accommodation. I was in a supported accommodation and I was abused by another client. Now, I didn't say anything at the time. And when I did say something, they were like, really? I said, yeah, it did. But because I chose not to say anything at the time, it was more difficult for people to believe me.
Right. Because it sounds like your story has changed when actually it's just revealing more.
Yeah. And
I think that might be something that's important for parents to explore, not just the if somebody touches you or if somebody hurts you, come to me, but it can be hard to come and share something. And there's also the place that we all want to be loved. We all want to be accepted. And so when significant people in our life are doing something that is hurtful or harmful, what does a child do with that? You want your mom in your life, you want your dad in your life, you want your brother in your life or your cousin in your life. And also when you're very young, like you were, you're left susceptible to not being really able to take care of yourself or possibly get out of that situation. And so you just have to kind of endure it as best you can without really knowing what it is or what's going to happen to you. And kids freeze. Like it's petrifying. It's petrifying when something's going on and the person's telling you it's okay, or it's not a big deal, or you want it, or this is what happens, or don't tell anybody, or I'll kill you if you do, or, your mommy said it's okay. No one comes to you and says, hey, I'm about to hurt you. And like, that sucks. And it's really wrong. And I shouldn't do this, but I don't care about your feelings and I'm going to do it anyway. That we'd actually deal with that a whole lot better. Be like, no, but we would know it's not based upon us. But the messaging that comes with abuse or hurt, this is your fault, you wanted this is okay, because there has to be something that justifies the behavior that the person's doing. They find some way to be able to tell themselves it doesn't matter, or it's okay, or it's not a big deal, whereas the child should be the victim should be the one who gets to decide that, not the perpetrator or the abuser.
And the problem is, and I know it as well, when you do talk about any abuser, they've had things that triggered their past, but at the same time, it doesn't justify their actions to be that way.
Of course not. Yeah. But hurt people oftentimes hurt others. And a lot of times they don't see it that way. There's a lot of belief. I see it in my life. I see it with clients all the time. There's a lot of belief that I am loving you in doing this, be it shunning you, accusing you, rejecting you, punishing you. There's a belief oftentimes that this is my way of loving you or doing what's right. That's pretty subjective, because I know there have been times that people have said they've done things for me out of love that didn't feel of love. And it wasn't that like I hadn't necessarily done something that didn't need to have consequences, but the response to it didn't feel of love. It felt of punishment or shame or blame or fear-based. So I think that's a lot of the challenge. I heard a really fascinating podcast of Ram Dass's, and it was about socialization and our ego. And what he said is we come into the world believing we're perfect. And then how our caregivers respond to us, give us cues of how we're perceived. And a baby becomes very adept at picking up those cues, smiles and speaking to you and picking you up. And so very quickly, we adjust ourselves to do what our caregivers are wanting us to do. And then we receive more love. And then when we get into social situations, 2, 3 years old, we start to realize that there's ways that we are to behave that are acceptable and that are not. And then there's a deeper shift that happens from I am perfect to I am worthy, or I'm doing right if I get back from you that which I desire. And then there's a split of self, because now I'm no longer focused on how I feel or who I believe I am. I'm focused on how you perceive me. And at that point, there's a deepened wound within us, which is, I am not worthy. I'm not good enough. Because unless I get cues back from you that you accept me, I am not good enough. And I think that's a huge part of our human challenge, is not allowing ourselves to find within ourselves, but really focusing on what the world says. And we have created a world for ourselves that's a big piece with social media and with everything being online. There is a big piece in people liking you or looking at the credentials that you have and finding them appropriate. It's not as simple as raising the chickens and the cows and your grain. Now there is a social need for most of us to present ourselves in a way that will be received. And so it's an interesting dilemma we have created for ourselves. And I think it's a lot of our depression and our anxiety and our addictions that we know in many ways that we are not connected and we're not feeling pleased within ourselves, but yet we don't know what to do with that in the social constraint. And so we come up with ways to try to numb that instead of really explore it deeply.
Yeah, and you touch upon now it is nowadays. Would you say it is about more people gaining social validation to be that stamp in the world? Because I've come across
I think there's a huge push for that. Sure, especially with influencers now. Now, you just have to be someone that for some reason the social media is drawn to. Doesn't have to be someone who has a talent, let's say in an education or even a completion of something. It might just be you've got a great smile, a great personality. And so people now are becoming famous for how they appear, might be who they are, but how they appear. And I think it's just a further step that is confusing our youth, which is you can be a millionaire by doing TikToks or YouTubes or, Facebooks, all the social medias, which are incredibly powerful platforms for growing who you are in your business. I mean, they work unbelievably. And there can be a lot of people who don't. And so a lot of our youth now think they're going to be the next influencer, and some of them are right. Some of them are going to make zillions of dollars, by their personality or their look. So it's interesting. Yeah. It's always been there. I mean, the beautiful person, the talented person, the athlete, if you go way back to Roman and Grecian times, it's always been there. But with the fact that we can connect with millions of people in a second, it's changed the game quite a bit.
And it's not just about social media. We go back to the subject of abuse, abusers who abuse people, those people who get abused often then seek the social validation by going online. That's where I believe is where the social validation is, because there has been something happening in their life, so they get triggered to say, am I worthy? Am I worthy?
And the dangerous thing is that it depends upon who happens to look at your post, what they will say, and you will get both sides. That's why there's so much concern for what is accessible, because if you do put up, I want to kill myself, you'll get both sides. Or like, I think I should live, you'll get both sides too. And so, but it's also quite a predicament when we're going to others to ask that. Please tell me I'm okay that I've just done this, or please tell me that I'm not okay that I just did this. Please give me validation to make this choice that I want to make. It's interesting that we will even do that.
And then,
interesting.
And then you get, this is the research I've been doing. Then you get people who regress into their little childlike states, and then it gets into another situation where, and this is, like I said, this is me researching, you just end up in that little state, and then you end up regressing, and you find it seeking a mommy or daddy, and you end up being a little boy or little girl. And then it goes into I think they call it in the term what I read, DDLG, or I forgot how they describe it for the mother figure, but it's in that state where you want to have that relationship, and you act like a little girl, little boy, to have that relationship with a person who is a dad figure or mother figure. And people say it's wrong, which I'm not saying it is wrong or right, but that's, again, it's validation, I believe.
Well, and I think anything that we have not had that we feel that would have helped us, we gravitate toward. My mom, I loved her dearly, but by being mentally ill, like, there was a lot that was missing in my childhood of raising me. And then there's also places she was phenomenal, like philosophy and spirituality and realities. I mean, we were talking about Alan Watts when I was 12 and the Mayan civilization. So I was just fed deeply in some areas and then pretty impoverished in others. But she killed herself when I was 16, and then I was on my own at 17. And so I know for me, like, kind of wanting an adult figure in my life to kind of guide me a little bit has been something that I know I kind of gravitate toward. It's part of why I went to church. It's part of why I got the education that I had. It's part of why I do the career I do. It's part of the reason why I wanted to be married. So it's important that we realize that. And if it is something that we feel we are missing or could benefit from, what are healthy ways to do that? I know that I have looked toward older, a little bit, or just much wiser people to be my therapist or to be my mentor, so that I am working with someone who knows more than what I know, and has a different life experience than mine. But I think we're all looking for that which we're not yet. I think the challenge is a lot of times we're looking for it in the outside world instead of giving ourselves the time to look for it within. And I think that's a lot of the movement that's going on within people right now in the world, is really starting to question, I don't really know who I trust, but why am I not trusting myself? And then coming back to that place of integration, I hope, which is finding what is it that you believe and then questioning it. I always tell my clients, ask yourself, is this something of help or is this something that hurts? And if it's something that hurts, my belief is that is not something that is of the divine. That is not something that would be of God. That isn't something that perpetuates love and well-being in this world. If it's something that's helpful, then pursue it or consider it and feel that one out. I'm not saying that we don't go through things that are hurtful. We absolutely do. But do we want to be perpetuating hurt? That's an individual question. There are some people who will say yes, which is very sad, but there are people who do. When I was first dating my husband, we did a a program, and it was talking about relationship. And one of the questions was, can you say that you will never intentionally wound your partner's spirit? That was a piece of cake for me, piece of cake for Ted, but it's not for everybody.
So,
And that's something to explore. Why would you want to hurt another? And what does that do for you? And where does that come from? And there's abuse or there's neglect beneath that, for sure. I was in a market before I was a therapist, and there was this little boy who was screaming at the top of his lungs, and his mom, bless her heart, was having a horrible day, and she was not handling it well. And she was saying things like, shut up, or I'll give you something to cry about. And the kid was just wailing. And as it was finally my time to pay, like, it was a lot. And the person ahead of me had been complaining about the kid the whole time. And I'd kept my mouth shut, but my head was going wild inside. And as I was about to pay, the man behind me in line, I swear to God, it was the manifestation of Jesus, said, I wonder what is hurting that poor child so much that he must scream so loudly. I could not even turn around because I realized I had not even had that thought. I hadn't had that thought, why is that child so hurt? And I hadn't had that thought, that poor mother must be struggling, trying so hard with this situation in the store. I just wanted him to shut up. And I got to my car and my heart just cracked. And I thought, dear Lord, Heather, here you are, a human being on this earth, and here you are wanting to be a therapist. And how little was your compassion in that moment? And that changed me quite a bit. I still have a lot to learn about being compassionate always. I still very many times find myself in that other place, but I question it a lot. Are you bringing compassion? Are you bringing love? Or are you bringing judgment and hurt?
Yeah. So going to the future, how do you see things progressing within the human society as a whole in being compassionate about the subjects we've talked about? Do you think it'd
Well,
be
the split's becoming broader and broader and broader and broader and broader, which is what has to happen. For there to be a need to shift something, there has to be a large divide, because of what otherwise the need is not so great unless everyone becomes illuminated together in love. So my belief is it's playing out just as it is to play out, and we will see more and more divisiveness, and we will question it more and more. We will become more and more uncertain of things. Or possibly more and more certain of things. It's really up to us to decide what we do with this. I mean, it's our lives. It's how we choose to play this life out. There are a lot of people who are really coming into their alignment and their truth and looking at the beliefs that they've had and what they have followed and questioning it. Questioning it. Why is it that you can tell me how I am to live my life and I'm supposed to do it in the way that you tell me I'm supposed to do it? Or why is it that there is no compassion for what I have experienced? And how do I fit under this little box? I've had a lot of youth come to me. Not so much in 23, but in 22, I had a lot of youth coming to me, teenagers who'd never been in a relationship, and they were deciding that they were going to go through transsexuality. And I said to them, have you been in a relationship yet? And they said, no. And I said, then what is it that is telling you that you are not to be of the gender that you are? And what I got back so many times was, I just don't feel feminine, or I just don't feel masculine. And I said, so I don't even know what that means. What does that mean? Like, I can only tell you what I think I feel like of me. Do I have feminine traits? Absolutely. Do I have masculine traits? Absolutely. I said, instead of trying to take you out of the box that you feel you shouldn't be in, and move you into a different box, why don't we just focus on helping you find out who you are?
Mm.
And not by a medical process. How about we start with a heart process? And it was wild what happened. Because so much of our life is not about, am I a man or a woman, or what sexual parts do I have? It's, do I receive myself as I am?
Mm.
Can I let myself be who I am? And if there's parts I don't desire of me, how do I allow myself to alter that, shift that, change that in ways that don't harm myself or hurt myself and can provide growth? But it's a very different model. We don't cut away part of ourselves or toss away part of ourselves. Because even if you do, like, that memory of you is still there. So it's important that we're a lot more mindful of what we're doing. And I'm not saying that people, there isn't a time to choose a surgery, but I think there's a whole other side of what's beneath that and below that and underneath that to explore. I think we're going to have quite a challenge there as we go through this process, because it's so accessible to alter yourself physically. I don't think our challenge is so much the physical, though it might be part. I think it's more so how we view ourselves, regardless.
Yeah.
We're a lot more than a sexual part. We're a lot more. And I think we're not really getting to the core, which is taking time to really find out who you are. Now, I may be misspeaking, because I'm sure a lot of people do an incredible amount of exploration of that. And I'm so glad, because I think it's necessary. I think it's necessary. So if I've said anything that to anyone has sounded short-sighted or offensive, please forgive me. It is not my desire. I don't think any of us fit into one category of exploring either. I just really hope that people really explore who they are to find out what's congruent with them and let themselves find that place of self, because it's going to be unique to them alone.
And I will add to that, it's just your thoughts and your thoughts alone,
100%.
and they don't represent anything that anyone else does believe. So do not judge.
Yeah, I just want people to take time to find out what their truth is, because only you individually can know your truth. And that's really important, that each person finds that and what that is and what that means. Yeah. And I think our world makes it hard to do that sometimes.
So lastly, we got some links that you sent me, but can you tell us the links that people can get in contact with you if they want to reach out and talk to you?
Sure. The easiest is my website, which is www.drheatherbrowne.com. That has all my social media links, and everything is on there. But if you have any questions about what I've said, or want to pursue anything further, there's also freebies and things like that on my page. I'd be happy to have your listeners come. I hope what we've talked about has provoked some thought and maybe some heart, and that you will give compassion to yourself and on the journey you're on. It's a tough walk being human, I find, in a lot of ways. Beautiful, but it's hard, and it's hard to know, like, how do we navigate this? And I think we all need each other to help us along that path.
And that's why the journey is called the journey, because everyone has got a unique journey. So, Heather Browne, thank you for sharing your journey with us today.
Thank you so much. Bless you all.
That was The Journey, hosted by Wise Words Imaging, hosted by David Hackett. Be sure to like, subscribe and listen to another journey coming soon.